Dudes and dudettes. Today we're gonna do a summary of George and Nanotech Technologies webcast. So for those of you who haven't listened to it or doesn't have time to listen to it, this is a very shortened version. So in that podcast, basically George and the Nanotech Security Corp CEO, which Nanotech Security already been acquired by Meta, went on a webcast and the host asked them some questions regarding, why George will acquire Nanotech Technology and what is the logic behind Nanotech Technology, Nanotech Technology Security Corp, reasoning for actually, getting acquired by George. Because Nanotech Security Corp, their principal business is in creating those. So for those of you who have your wallet out, take your wallet out and look at a dollar bill. Okay, look at the $100 bill. And you will see there's a holographic sort of like a little code on top of it, like the blue line. If you look at you put it against the light or just do some wiggling around, you will see that there's some security measures that were put up by the central government to make sure that nobody do forged bills. Okay, and then in Canada, I think in the early 2010s. What they do is they change their dollar bill from a cotton-based dollar bill to a plastic dollar bill. And then what Nanotech Security Corp is doing right now is they're saying they're partnering up with a top 10 central bank, which in our opinion, it probably is the Canadian central bank, because A, they're in Canada, and then B, if you are a central bank, would you willing to really work for a company that's not your native company? And C, according to the webcast, seems like a lot of people who works in the Nanotech Security Corp used to be working at the Canadian central bank. So you got a lot of those insider connections going on there. So we think it's gonna be the Canadian central bank. And for those of you who want a very detailed DD on Nanotech Security Corp, we are gonna post a video out maybe later this week or maybe later next week about a very detailed due diligence on the company. So right now, even after the acquisition, Nanotech Security Corp is trading at 1.22 Canadian dollars. So then the market cap is around $85 million US dollars. And if we go actually look at their annual revenue, their biggest revenue source is actually the central bank. And it gives them about a quarter revenue of $2.6 million, but I think that's Canadian dollars. So then if you look at the entire contract, this entire company actually worth about, 30 Canadian dollars plus intrinsic asset. So if we do all the math, it's probably worth 50 million Canadian dollars ish. And so right now it's traded at over 2x on its actual worth right now. So the company is actually not overtly overvalued, considered it's only 2x. Meta is very, very overextended right now. But hey, who knows, right? Because according to George, if the market condition goes well, then hey, there might be another squeeze. So go back to the podcast or webcast. What I talk about is the reason why George finally revealed, right? The reason why the actual synergy there, the scope, the economic of scope, right? For those of you who want a very interesting econ word, right? Is basically Nanotech Security Corp produces nano components, and then George produces nano components. And then they both produce a thin layer of film. Okay, so Nanotech Security Corp provide this very thin layer of film, and they put it on these banknotes. Okay, and then they've been, according to George in their webcast, they have their own way of a roll-to-roll production process of these thin films, which makes sense, right? And then we finally understand the roll-to-roll production sort of pattern George was quote-unquote developing in their own house, right? In this new, the facility they're doing. Basically what they did is they bought Intel's roll-to-roll production sort of like a patent so that they can use the mechanics of how Intel used to produce the first generation, not really nano components, not really semiconductor, but it's basically like a semiconductor components, and then they borrowed that. They bought that patent and used that patent to to become the principle of producing roll-to-roll nano components, like basically the principal IP. Okay, so it's not really that novel, and for those of you who are saying that it's groundbreaking, apparently it's not that groundbreaking. But hey, like this is the first material company that has achieved or well achieved roll-to-roll production with a semi-cheap solution. And we haven't done a very detailed math regarding how much revenue per square meter is actually gonna make, because there are a lot of other considerations you have to consider. Consider George actually does not control his suppliers' pricing strategy, and George needs to put up collateral to produce these films. And for those of you who are fantasizing and saying George is gonna produce semiconductors, George explicitly said they're only producing metamaterials. So basically, they do not have the production capability to produce metamaterial based semiconductor. They might do research on it, and B, they do not plan to do that, or more like they either plan to do some research on how to make photonic chips actually viable if they actually have the space or money or have the brains or have the foresight to do it. And C is they're basically just trying to produce materials at a cheaper cost, right? And for those of you who've been in the semiconductor industry, you know that the problem with metamaterial is always about cost and always about the customer conversion, right? Going back to the webcast again. And the third thing they talk about is why Nanotech Security Corp would accept the acquisition by Meta. And one of the things they don't talk about is George actually bought it in a very huge goodwill. He basically bought it 2x to 3x the actual market value, the fair value of Nanotech Security Corp. Consider that they're not really making money. And then Nanotech Security Corp said, other banking node people are sort of looking to acquire them too. But according to our insight, that doesn't seem to be a good investment for the banking node people to really acquire them. Consider they're on a Canadian exchange and their maximum potential revenue is not as high as we originally thought they would. But anyways, so basically what George is trying to say is, hey guys, so Meta has so many verticals, and then now they just use basically $56 million US dollars of shareholder funding to buy another vertical. And then this vertical's current revenue is about $30 million Canadian dollars, which is $24 million US dollars per 4-year to 5-year contract. Okay, and then according to the CEO of Nanotech Security Corp, the old 4-year contract, 4 to 5 year contract, it's gonna end by the end of this year. So then they're very confident to land a stage 2 contract. So if we do the math of a stage 2 contract, we put a huge premium on the stage 2 contract. Let's just say it's gonna worth 2x the amount of money that they promised. And then for the next 4 years, we probably will see Nanotech Security Corp's stock price, if that confirmed, go up to about 1.5 Canadian dollars. So at this point, this company is actually looking pretty good, considered they're in a banking node. Industry, and this entire industry is waning because people are going digital instead of going back to the physical currency. But again, the central banks do need to print physical money. So, but that also means that they do have a sort of a market, revenue cap per country. Consider central bank only print about 150 billion notes every single year, and then the banks print 30% of it. And if you do the math, 70% of it goes to a lot of the big boys. And then Nanotech Security only produces the technology to create this anti-fraud sort of film. And then if you go, and me and number two are trying to go down the rabbit hole of how exactly they're gonna split up production, or the sort of the process of actually creating a bill. It's just way too complicated, and plus it's national secret or whatever. So then we probably think that Nanotech Security, if they're gonna cover production, probably gonna produce less than 10% to 20% of all these nodes. And then if the technology is is secure and mature, the profit margin is not gonna be as high as possible. Cause like think about it, how much you're gonna make from making one $100 bill, right? Like a penny. All right, this is just how we do our valuations, right? And that's about it. And oh yeah, one thing that I forgot to mention is one of the things that Nanotech Security Corp CEO mentioned that why they decided to be acquired is because George, he didn't talk about like the huge premium George is paying him, but hey, that's not what the shareholders want to hear, right? But he talked about the potential sort of like in the future they will need liquidity and they want the Nasdaq listing to grant them liquidity. So it feels like the Canadian startups just really want the Nasdaq liquidity per se, and they think it's a huge. The liquidity provides huge value, which in this case then that just means in the future when they are gonna scale or when they're in the process of rapid scaling, they're gonna need a lot more money than they have right now. And then if you look at their burn rate, this company's burn rate is actually healthier than George's. So I don't know how these two companies is gonna synergize, because George just basically provided new burn for Nanotech Security, but basically by sacrificing his own burn. But I guess the medical component really takes like 2 to 3 years to develop, probably more than that. For those of you who are in the biotech industry or whatever, right? We all know that it takes a longer time to produce, especially with the FDA approval, things going on with the Alzheimer's drugs and some other incidents happening in the FDA. And also, if you are really banking on a 5G rollout, the CFO said that in the webcast that they are close to revenue producing. But according to the tonality of the CFO, it seems like revenue producing stage for them is like a couple of $1,000 is revenue producing stage. So don't get your really hopes up. They might land a contract with someone for the 5G rollout in the next few months, or luckily by the end of this year. But don't be too positive about it. I mean, our channels stand on Nanotech and MMAT is alright. We say we stand by our original prediction that in 6 years, if there's no fraudulent activity, there's no major stupid fuck ups or whatever, the stock's gonna be $30. But our principle or our principle of trading for metamaterial for over any stock in the market is we want to use naturally provided leverage on the market, either using selling method, buying method, or options to make more money, and then do not take on leverage ourselves or do not take on margin ourselves. So we create a sort of like a safer environment for our own trading environment, but at the same time utilizing options that provided by the market to sort of like profit even more. So you will see some very like sort of unnatural, anti-human methodology or like thinking to sort of like make a profit. So for those of you who stayed in the end, we're gonna do a metamaterial option chain analysis, or more like what really is going on for next week. You will see, right? So on my stream, I talked about iViewer or so this week. It seems like today is a very interesting day. A lot of stock actually opened lower than before, and the Nasdaq, the Nasdaq is doing its thing. Okay, everybody is scary crow about there's gonna be a 10% correction, and then if there's a correction, then small cap's gonna get hit super hard. But you see, like all of these premiums haven't changed. Okay, all of these IVs haven't changed. So we will only know by the middle of like this week to really know what's gonna happen on by the option expiration. What normal is the price will probably stabilize between $5 to $6. If you want to see a gamma strike, like a huge sort of like a gamma squeeze, you want to see the price around $8 ish. And then for those of you who are basically speculating and looking for a really bad sort of the worst case scenario, then the stock will probably close at 3.8-ish by the end of 9/17. So basically you have a range from 3.8 to about $7 to $8 if you're super positive and optimistic. So yeah, use this information at your own risk. We're not financial advisors. We do not give financial advices. See you guys on the upside. Everything we say on the channel is for shits and giggles.